Salvini U-turn, yes to Green Pass and nuclear power. School 7 days before the start, the transport puzzle remains. Italy won the Women's Volleyball European Championships. Italy football team drew 0-0 with Switzerland in Basel. Welcome to Italy Today newscast. Within 5 days, Matteo Salvini went from voting to abolish the Green Pass in committee to yes to the certificate, at least for public employees. The summary in the report.
The turnaround is complete. In just 1 week, Matteo Salvini changed mind on the Green Pass and says yes to the certificate, at least for public employees, or the goal of Prime Minister Mario Draghi, at least in the short term. Nuclear is a much cleaner and much less dangerous energy than others, said the leader of the Lega. Matteo Salvini has no doubts and takes the side of the Minister of Ecological Transition Roberto Cingolani, defending the opening words on the latest generation of nuclear power. In the same minutes, the Minister of Economic Development Giancarlo Giorgetti makes a very similar speech. The theme of transition cannot become an ethical philosophical discourse. And therefore it is necessary to demand an area of comparisons and equal competitiveness for all. Avoiding that the responses of the various countries are asymmetrical. The position of the Lega secretary, expressed in dialogue with journalists before leaving Cernobbio, is identical. For Salvini, the response of the environmentalists and the Movimento Cinque Stelle to the words of Minister Cingolani is wrong. If one already says no to evaluate, he demonstrates a closed mind. Evaluation does not already involve judgment. In my opinion, it was a mistake to stop in the past. Clear that it is a type of choice that brings you results after 15 years, not after 15 days. On the immigration, Interior Minister Lamorgis explained that the largest landings of immigrants are due to the pandemic. For Salvini, the data from the Ministry of the Interior are disturbing. If instead of 5,000 40,000 arrive, it is a double problem, above all with the pandemic, because they all come from the African and Asian continent where vaccination reaches 3%. I talked about it with Mario Draghi. The Prime Minister said that the Minister of the Interior works very well and above all that no one has a magic wand. There are international conjunctures that have an effect on migratory flows, such as the pandemic, Salvini continues, but in 2019 we were in the full Libyan crisis. Now there is the Tunisian crisis of course, but the second country for arrivals of immigrants is Bangladesh. Egyptians arrive because we no longer have any kind of relationship with the Egyptian government. There is obviously a problem. We were in Libya before, now there are Turks and Russians. The problem therefore is geopolitics, not the failure to block ships. For Salvini we must work in Tunis, Tripoli and across the border to find a solution. The Lega is ready to govern with FDI leader Giorgia Meloni, but it depends on Draghi and his desire to become President of the Republic, according to Salvini. And if Draghi becomes President of the Republic he will have to go to the elections without waiting for the expiry of the current legislature. And finally, on the Green Pass, Matteo Salvini replies to journalists on last week's amendments to block the provision. By Borghi, the Lega does what the Secretary decides. That vote led to 10 approved amendments, from swabs to some exemptions. The Green Pass should be extended to state governments, to those who have contact with the public, concludes the leader.
School is still in chaos just 7 days before the start. Staggered admissions are still to be decided and controllers are never mentioned. The report for us.
The schools are going to reopen in 1 week, but the government is late on the rules to apply on transport and entrance. The investments made by the governors in additional services for local transport are not known. The safety protocol for public transport workers has not yet been updated. It is not clear whether there will be resources to hire the controllers, and there is no mapping of how many school mobility managers are there. But Minister Giovannini reassures, on Wednesday, people without a green pass on long-distance trains were only 0.2%. The first day of school is just over a week away, but the public transport system will arrive late for the appointment. School leaders complain that they still do not have data on the needs of their students and do not know whether or not they will have to make staggered admissions. The question linked to the departure of lessons is uphill. In recent days, Minister Giovannini met with the trade unions, but beyond the publication of the guidelines, everything was postponed to September 20th for a new meeting, by which time the school year will have started a week ago in most regions. For months, Giovannini has insisted that in schools each headmaster appoints staff to fill this role that should carry out the homework travel plan, but the majority of school leaders have no intention of respecting the ministry's instructions. In reality, we are talking about a figure that was introduced by law in December 2015. In this act, The Minister of Education was required to adopt specific guidelines to favor the institution in all schools of all types and levels, within the scope of their administrative and organizational autonomy of the figure of the school mobility manager. Giovannini also reiterated the importance of this appointment chosen voluntarily and without reducing the teaching, to be identified among the teaching staff. The minister's insistence, however, clashes with reality. In these 6 years, very few schools have charged these managers. In a quick survey, out of 10 managers of different schools in Italy, no one has this role in their staff as of August 31st, and only 2 will appoint him with the first faculty board. The trade unions who met Giovannini on Monday also have some doubts on the issue of transport and school restart. The category secretary of the CISL, Salvatore Palecchia, underlines the issues that still need to be resolved. The first, to understand what the regions have done with the economic resources available for the additional services of local transport. The second, to be aware of the appointment of mobility managers. We have Istat data as of 2019 on the subject of public transport. 3 million people used a vehicle every day and 900,000 by train. The CIL union Stefano Malorgio is more critical, and there are other issues to be resolved. Before today, ticket control was suspended. Minister Giovannini intends to restore it, but it must be done ashore, not on board, and it cannot be done by the drivers. For the union, more experience has been gained, but the flexibility of schedules in the cities has never really come into operation, and this will continue to create problems.
The Italian national team won the Women's Volleyball European Championships. In the final, the national team beat Serbia, who played at home. Our report on the victory.
The Italian national team won the Women's Volleyball European Championships, which has been running for 2 weeks in 4 Eastern European countries. In the final, the national team beat Serbia, who played at home, by 3-1. The match was held at the TAC Arena in Belgrade, full of fans. It is Italy's third victory in the European Volleyball Championships after those of 2007 and 2009. Paola Egonu, one of the strongest volleyball players in the national team, was awarded the best player of the tournament at the end of the match. For Italy, it was also a half revenge. At the Olympics a few weeks ago, they were eliminated in the quarterfinals by Serbia, considered one of the strongest teams in the world. The match was very balanced until the end of the third set, which Italy won in comeback, also thanks to the entry of Ofelia Malinov. In the fourth set, Italy got off to a strong start thanks to a series of dunks by Paola Egonu and Miriam Silla, so much so that at one point they had separated Serbia by 13 points. The decisive point, which made Italy win the game, came after a dunk by Serbia that ended up outside. It is an undertaking that makes us proud, after a difficult period and the waste of Tokyo. The credit is all of the girls, who have gradually found awareness of their means. It wasn't easy, but they succeeded. In their home, it has a particular flavor. This was said, at Fiumicino Airport, by the coach of the women's national volleyball team, European champion, Davide Mazzanti, with the gold medal around his neck, just returned to Italy via Frankfurt. For him, celebrations, choirs and hugs at the exit of Terminal 3. Congratulations also from passengers and airport operators towards holiday destinations. The women's national volleyball team climbs to the top of Europe and does so in front of the 20,000 spectators in Belgrade, against the host Serbia, who until now was considered the bête noire of the Azzurri. Italy, led by coach Davide Mazzanti, cancels the Olympic disappointment suffered against the Serbian girls, and wins 3-1 in the 32nd edition of the European Women's Championship. 12 years after the last final played in the continental tournament, and the last gold, the Azzurri has succeeded in the maximum feat and are back on the top step of the podium after a tiring start, since the hosts are awarded the first of the 4 sets played this evening. It is the third title for Italian volleyball.
Mancini's Italy is a record, 36 games without defeat, none like the Azzurri, but qualification is still not reached.
Italy drew 0-0 with Switzerland in Basel. Direct qualification for the next World Cup is still to be won, but coach Roberto Mancini can console himself with a record. With this, 36 consecutive useful results are achieved. overcome the unbeaten stripes of 35 races in Spain 2007-09 and Brazil 1993-96, which had won respectively a European and a World Cup. The Brazilians, however, consider their series to be 36 games long. The match of discord is Brazil-Romania under-21 in September 1995, which ended 2-2. To dispel any doubts and overcome any other national team, the Azzurri will have to avoid a knockout with Lithuania on Wednesday evening. Historically in September, we have always suffered, and it would be wrong to dramatize 2 draws. But we need more concreteness in the attack. The goal was missed, and how it was. To record Italy, it was not enough to dominate, because if you don't score, you won't win. The Azzurri have done everything wrong, even a penalty, to get the World Cup qualification in their pocket, which will now have to be played against Switzerland in Rome on November 12. The national team were better on the pitch on Thursday, even if they have not yet rediscovered the magic of the European Championship. But at the resumption of the season, many great teams are struggling, from France to Spain and even more. We are struggling, who historically have always suffered in September. Dramatizing these 2 draws would be a mistake even more than unfair. The chances of going to Qatar without going through the repechage roulette remain intact. Let's look at the positive confirmations. Meanwhile, the defense held up very well yesterday. On the other hand, the primacy of 36 consecutive games without defeats, on what else rests if not on the ability to concede as few opportunities as possible to the opponents? Chiellini restored safety to all his linemates. Donnarumma had to struggle very little. It was another Italy right from the start. Locatelli, the best, as well as physicality, brought quality as a dowry, launches and game changes that put Switzerland in enormous difficulty. The solutions available to Mancini for the midfield are so many and different that it is probably the most complete one in the world. Unfortunately, creativity in the middle of the field cannot find who translates it into the concreteness of the goal. The chronic difficulties of the center forward were joined by those of Berardi, who, placed alone in front of the goalkeeper by a delight of Locatelli, was unable to give Italy a well-deserved advantage. And not even a penalty was not enough. In the race to qualify and then to the World Cup, the difficulty ahead is the most serious problem to be solved. In the last 4 games, the national team, apart from penalties, scored 3 goals, 2 with the signing of Chiesa. It's hard to think that the national team can do without them. He is the only one who can surprise the opponent's defenses and one of the few who takes responsibility for individual play in the attack. Even if we are almost unbeatable in complicating easy practices, we expect a sign from this European champion national team that refers to the glory of Wembley. If we see that sign, we will know that Qatar is not a mirage.
That's it for today. Thanks for joining us. We invite you to subscribe to the Facebook page and follow us again.